Tonight on Bird Fans Forever, we're talking Illinois State basketball and one of the biggest changes currently reshaping college athletics with Brennan White from Illinois State University and Jason Higdon from Empower the Nest. The focus of tonight's conversation is the transition from traditional NIL collectives to university-run revenue sharing and NIL support models, and what those changes could mean for Illinois State basketball and the future of Redbird athletics. We'll discuss how the landscape is evolving, what role collectives may still play moving forward, and how schools, supporters, and student athletes are adapting to this new era of college sports. If you're trying to understand where college athletics is headed and what it means for Illinois State basketball, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Please welcome Brennan White and Jason Higdon from Empower the Nest to Bird Fans Forever.
Hello and welcome to Bird Fans Forever, episode 84 with Brennan White and Jason Higdon. Now I'll have Brennan tell you his title and Jason when we get to them. So, hi guys, how you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good.
All right, now we'll get into titles. So Brennan told me his title off air and I just was like, nope. So Brennan, help me out here. What your title?
Yeah, it's rather long. So I serve as assistant AD in our administration, and I serve as the general manager for athletics, and I oversee NIL administration.
Very cool. And then Jason, do you have a title at Empower the Nest?
Yes, it's not nearly as long. It's just president of Empower the Nest.
Okay. El Presidente.
You got it.
Yeah. We wouldn't make fun of it. All right, so you guys have both been on. We've talked about how you got to ISU. If you guys want to hear that, go back to one of the previous episodes with Brennan and Jason. Jason's actually in the Three-Timers Club. Brennan's now in the Two-Timers Club. And this is awesome. So, Brennan, we wanted to start with you and talk about the Excellence Club, which is going to take over for the 1998 Club and Fly With Us, or just 1998 Club. So help us out there.
Yeah, so we... in the early days of NIL, institutions weren't allowed to compensate student athletes directly. So that meant money couldn't come directly from the athletic department to student athletes. So Jason, being very generous with Empower the Nest, took over as president when I was hired in August of 2023. And we really grew it from the ground up. And, we had Empower the Nest. And then, we had Fly With Us and 1998 Club, which were kind of umbrellas under Empower the Nest. So it was just sports-specific collectives for individuals that were, if they were really interested in women's basketball or men's basketball. Right. Now shifting because of the House settlement, which took place on July 1st of 2025. So it was, really kind of what reshaped college athletics this past year. There's a bunch of different aspects to the House settlement, but the main one is revenue sharing. So it allowed institutions to share dollars directly with the student athletes, but it also created a compliance system through the College Sports Commission that reviews third-party deals. So it wasn't that we necessarily wanted to go away from Empower the Nest and Fly With Us in the 1998 Club. I think we had an incredible system in place, but it was more so for the rules and regulations so that we were not in violation of the new House settlement. We were almost forced to bring everything in-house. To answer your question, you asked about the Excellence Fund. We launched the Redbird Athletics Excellence Fund, and every school has their variation of that fund. But, it's essentially a fund that fans can give to now to help retain and recruit student athletes, which, I know the older generation maybe doesn't care for that some days, but, that's just the landscape that we're in now. So, fans can now give to the Redbird Athletics Excellence Fund, who is overseen by Nathaniel Smith on our development team. So it's very, very similar to, giving to the scholarship fund or the WAF, because you can now receive a tax deduction for your gift. So it gives us a little bit of a benefit now, because obviously Empower the Nest was not granted their 501c3, unfortunately. So again, I think it helps us a little bit when it comes to fundraising, but we're still navigating the unknown waters of college athletics these days.
So then, Jason, tell us how now Empower the Nest works, that given that you had a collective, now there's the Excellence Fund. What's the role now of Empower the Nest?
Yeah, we've really spent the last year, right? I look at it as a two-phase approach. Phase one has been over the last year transitioning everything over to ISU, right, with Brennan and Paul Cabas and the athletic department. So as they've been getting things up and moving, right, we've been moving bits and pieces and doing that transition. We're actually meeting as a board for phase two this month in June to sort of rebrand ourselves. So there's still, there's still an opportunity for us to help out ISU in a variety of ways. And we continue to have conversations with Brennan and Paul and, Dr. Beggs and in the athletic department on what's the best way to do that. So with our phase two kicking off, it's going to kind of rebrand ourselves a little bit, probably bring us a little bit more in line with some of the values with the Excellence Fund and what ISU is trying to do, through the NIL. Not saying we're not aligned now, but just keeping the communication in that cohesion. So, as things come up, we can still provide value. As Brennan said, we encourage a lot of our donors to go to the Employee Excellence Fund because there is that tax benefit. But we still do have donors that don't care, right? For the lack of a better way of putting it, right? They still like supporting the Empower the Nest, and some just kind of want to remain anonymous. So we provide that shield for them. So, it's just, again, expanding that, coming up with some new ideas and looking at ways to generate some revenue to help, not only the big four, but I think our mission still is to help, women's golf, men's golf, softball, baseball. Not saying the Excellence Fund isn't doing that, but right, anywhere we can help some of those, excuse me, my throat's getting a little dry there. Anywhere we can help some of those other, sports ISU can focus on some other things, we're going to do that.
So
yeah,
if
go ahead. To piggyback off what Jason said, it wasn't, like I said, I know it's extremely confusing for fans. It's, I work in it 24/7 and it's confusing for me. It wasn't that we wanted to go away from our collective. We almost had to. We tried to run deals through the collective, and they were denied by the College Sports Commission. So we really had no choice, because remember, the College Sports Commission, or the CSC rather, they look at each deal for a valid business purpose. So if fans are curious, they can get on the CSC's website and look up what that means. I won't bore them with it on here. But it's really like figuring out, how do we rebrand a collective? Like, what is allowed? Because there's not a guide out there that's just helping us along the way, because schools don't really want to give away their secrets. It's a very competitive landscape that we live in. So I think that's the biggest message to fans. It was more so of a have to remain competitive, not only in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, where we're going up against South Dakota State, a team like Montana State who has a huge budget for football, both operating and rev share. But then not to mention, in the Missouri Valley, remember, a lot of the teams for men's and women's basketball, they don't have football, or they don't support it as heavily. So hopefully that makes sense to fans. I know it's a confusing time right now in college athletics, though.
So Jason, lots of people were on a subscription, right? To Empower the Nest or 1998 Club. That doesn't happen anymore, right? The subscriptions have stopped, or are they still going?
No, we still do those, right? I know, and Brennan can correct me if I'm wrong here. I know one of the phases that they're getting to is eventually to offer, or potentially offer, a subscription base. So we continue to do that today, and we still have that. And then, right, we track where that money comes in, and people can say, do they want men's basketball? Do they want women's basketball? And then when we when we transfer money over and give that to ISU on behalf, right, we make notation of that, and they make notation of that. So it's a real easy way for your average fan, who can't afford or doesn't want to do $1,000 at a time, right? But $25 a month or $50 a month is super easy. Right. I mean, my wife still donates to the Fly with Us, monthly, and then that money just goes over.
And Brennan, you guys are close to getting a subscription, or?
Yeah, it's when you transition over to the university side of things, especially a state-run institution, there's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through when it comes to donating for things like that. So, like I said, it's really new territory for us. And I don't want to say it's added work to our fundraising team, but it kind of is. They're already raising money for Support Your Sport, WAF, Birds Give Back. So it's a lot to take on, because as we've progressed in this landscape, we've grown our overall rev share budget every single year, and that's a good problem to have right now. So it's definitely a work in progress in figuring out what is right for us, but most importantly, what do our fans want, right? Because they're the ones that are giving all the money.
Right.
Yeah, this is why the partnership is vital, right? So we can help and support where it may not make sense for the university, and we just keep that relationship going until, right, either the rules change so drastically that it's just no longer economically feasible, or right, the athletic department gets everything that they want in place, and then they're like, hey, now we are officially good, thanks for your service, and have a nice day.
Yeah, and then Brennan, you mentioned the potential the tax write-off and stuff like that, and it all depends on, hey, what's your tax bracket? Are you itemizing and all that stuff? But if you are itemizing, right, and theoretically, if someone gave $250, they could now give $350 and essentially net to the same number approximately. So that is an advantage. Depending if you're itemizing, so people that are itemizing, it really would make sense to go direct, to the Excellence Fund. Do you guys talk about that?
I'm definitely not a tax expert. I have trouble doing my own taxes sometimes. Maybe there's a future for you, Steve, to coach some of the fans up. But I let our development team run with that. That's their wheelhouse, and they're exceptional at what they do. I do my best when fans ask, or even now student athletes. I have student athletes coming to me for tax advice, so I don't want to give out the wrong advice and have the IRS show up at my front door or the student athlete's front door.
Yeah, that's the other aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think I'm very, very honest. Like, we don't have all the answers right now. Like, we just don't. We thought this thing changes by the month. It changes by the day. So we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that, most importantly, we put the student athletes first to make sure they have an exceptional experience. But then again, just to make sure we're doing things the right way from a compliance and a rules standpoint. Because, like I said, the goalposts are always moving, and it seems every day like we're playing by different rules.
Yeah. Hey, Brennan, can you explain to the fans, like, what exactly is like a revenue sharing? Okay, so part of some of the changes that we've gone through this was about a year ago, maybe just a little bit more than a year ago. Revenue sharing became a thing. You could opt in, opt out. Can you just give an overview, high level, of what that means?
So the House settlement, right? So on July 1st, 2025, that's when the House settlement went into effect. Schools had the ability to either opt into that or opt out of that. If you opted out of the House settlement, you had to wait, I believe, a full calendar year before you were able to opt in. So we made the decision to opt in early on because it gave us the ability to share revenue with our student athletes. And, when we use the term revenue sharing, I'm very, very honest with our student athletes, our coaches, and our fans. We are not, the University of Alabama or the University of Texas, because the revenue sharing salary cap this past year was $20.5 million. So that meant any school that opted into the house settlement could share up to $20.5 million with all of its sports. This year, for 2026-2027, it's going to increase to $21.3 million. So those are just dollars that are coming from the school. At those schools at the Power 4 level, it's actual revenue, because they're in a different ballgame financially with the capacity of their football stadiums, and a majority of their money comes from TV deals. So most of those schools are sharing the 21.3. We are not sharing 21.3 million, and we will never be in that ballpark. And I don't say that in a demeaning way. I say it in an honest way. For us, it's not revenue sharing. It's all driven by our fans. Because the only way that we make revenue is obviously going to the national championship for football, or if men's and women's basketball make the NCAA tournaments because of money from the TV deals. So that's what revenue sharing is for us. We just use the term because it's the technical term. So you have revenue sharing, which is money coming directly from the athletic department. For us, it is funded by donors. And then NIL is more of like your true marketing deals. So, if you're the stud point guard on the women's basketball team, or a standout quarterback on the football team, and Gatorade wants to partner with you, that's more of like the NIL side, which is what I think it was supposed to be originally in 2021. But
right.
Then it's we opened Pandora's box a little bit with that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense. That was a super long explanation.
Yeah, and so does the Excellence Fund or University of Texas, they have their own fund, does that count towards the revenue sharing number, or is it in addition to the 20.5?
So they've got a pretty hard cap on the 20.5 million. So I believe at the Power 4 level, from my understanding, the schools declare how much they're going to share, and then the conferences essentially take that out of what they would have earned in revenue. It's a very confusing landscape at the Power 4 level. All I know is at that level, there's just never enough money.
Yeah.
So
but at the Power 4, as you're competing against the 20.5 to be 21.3, a collective potentially, right? And
to a certain degree, as long as those deals pass through the College Sports Commission or the CSC.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
So some people are having a hard time understanding. Say, hey, it's capped at 20.5 last year. There's no way these numbers are right. But what they're not taking into consideration is there's a portion that's capped at 20.5. There's a whole nother revenue stream in the NIL, these deals.
Yeah.
And that's why the amounts at the Power 4s are way above 20.5.
And I think so. Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, yeah, so right at the Power 4, the P4s, you've got the university portion that's at 20.5. And then you can have, let's say Brennan's the quarterback at the University of Texas.
He was a quarterback, though.
I know.
I had the competitiveness, just not the physical attributes of a D1 athlete.
He's going to get a portion, right, from the university, and then he's going to sign a deal with, with some local company in Texas or five that really makes up that money. Yeah, so when you hear of student athletes making $3-5 million, right? That number comes from a lot of different sources, and collectives are still in play at the P4, not as much, but they're still there. So yeah, everybody hears, like you said, 20.5 million from the university, but then all of a sudden, you've got 3 football players making $9 million of that. you're telling me you're paying the rest of the football team and your basketball team and your women's basketball team $11 million out of that? Well, no, right? It's like it's a lot of numbers that come in to make that up.
And our athletes still can get that deal with a pizza place,
Yep.
Oh yeah.
car dealership, right? So there's still money to be still done, right? I wanted to get into these, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah, and it's from my understanding and talking with individuals around the NIL world, what those dollars, the sponsorship dollars rather, those are referred to as over the cap dollars. So every institution has a MMR partner. For us, it's Learfield. I know a lot of schools use Playfly. Learfield handles all of our corporate partnerships. So, State Farm has their logo on our field. SEPQ owns the naming rights to our arena. Well, those companies can choose to do NIL through our MMR partners. And obviously at the Power 4 level, the dollars that are involved with those are much higher than we have. So that's where I think those additional dollars are coming from. Now, how that plays out into the contract aspect with the student athlete, I don't have a direct answer on you for that because the contracts are on a need-to-know basis at those schools. So I imagine it's, I would bet it's, student athletes are, they've got a portion of their contract is revenue sharing dollars, so strictly cash from the school. And then maybe part of the contract is gift in kind or sponsorship dollars that are coming from the MMR partners. So, theoretically, maybe you can pay your quarterback less in revenue sharing because he's more marketable with people that you're working with, whether it's Gatorade, Nike, or whoever it may be. So I don't know how those conversations go, but that, from my understanding, that's how people are getting above that 20.5 and now 21.3 number.
Right. So my question then becomes, Jason, does these come through Empower the Nest then? Right? Or are these done? Are they still going? Or
so the Distill beer that's a partnership with ISU, right?
Okay.
So that was done through Distill and in Learfield, along with ISU. The Empower the Nest beer from Kegrove is no longer happening right now at this time. So it doesn't go through us. That's all purely just marketing through ISU.
Okay.
And I wish student athletes could partner with those companies, but that is unfortunately a huge compliance violation. So there, and that's another thing. There are restrictions on what student athletes can do third-party deals with. Whether it's tobacco, alcohol, sports gambling, as we have seen in the past couple weeks. That is a slight conflict of interest in college athletics these days. So I'm not going to name names on that. But so, there is a fine line with that, but, our student athletes do a good job at knowing what that is.
So Brennan, this is like the 5th or 6th year of NIL, right? But it just gets more and more complicated every year. So talk about the process now. The season ends and you're trying to retain players and you're trying to put a budget together and you're trying to figure out how much revenue is going to come in. It's not all guaranteed. How much more complicated it is now to bring all that together, and then to top it off, you get to talk to agents and stuff like that.
I've told our coaches, regardless of how complicated it is, I just look at it as an opportunity to get better, because every other school is going through the same things that we are. So, if you want to make excuses or, you probably weren't cut out for it to begin with. So, I think for us, if you fail to plan to fail, right? I'm a huge believer in that saying, and it was very, very relevant for this off season, because with football, we were playing in the national championship. Well, the portal had already opened for that, so we were behind. The next day, I was riding home with my old roommate, and I was on my computer and answering phone calls, figuring out what are we going to offer kids to keep them? Because a lot of those student athletes had very breakout performances on national television.
They did.
And same for our staff. The second the coaching staff got back, they went right into the office, I think, until 8 p.m. that night. Now, obviously, for basketball, it's even more challenging because the dollars are so inflated. And I think with the amount of student athletes entering the portal every year, that just complicates it. So, really it boils down to, Dr. Biggs and Paul having the conversation around budgets. They communicate that with the head coaches. And, in my GM role, I was very honest with our coaches. Like, I never want to, I truly believe coaches are the CEOs of their program at this level. And I've told all of our coaches, hey, I'm never going to tell you how to recruit, how to coach, what plays to call. That's not who I want to be. I may tell you what I think on the budget side, to be financially responsible, but at the end of the day, it's your call. And I've just told them I want to put them in the best position to, win championships and graduate their student athletes in that order.
But it does make it more complicated. Like it's like there's a huge variable now to the puzzle. Okay, and so you have a budget, and you go, I have X number of great players. I want to retain them all, but I can do A and I can do B. Forget even if there's an outside offer, right? That's complicated more. But like, there's only so much to spread, and it does make it much more difficult. And so you end up. You may have gone into coaching, but you end up minoring in business.
Yeah, and it's
finance.
That's the challenging part of this now is it is a business, and it's no longer a school's name or reputation is enough to attract a student athlete. While the facilities and the reputation and culture those things are important, dollars are at the very top of that list in conversations. And they're not always very fun conversations either. A lot of student athletes have representations and agents, and those agencies are going to do their roles. Their job is to get the most money for their client, and I certainly respect that. But there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things as well. So, we found out in basketball this year, the second you lose one player to the transfer portal, it changes your roster strategy in terms of who you're targeting in the portal. And you have to be ready to pivot because it's like you don't have much time to mess around.
Right.
If you wait 24 hours, the player that you're targeting could have signed with another school. And then you get into a bidding war. And, that's whether that's right or wrong, that's just the state of college athletics now. So it's, I think it's ever so more important to have a plan and communicate that with the coaching staffs. But, I've been very honest with coaches, like, we have to be prepared to walk away. We have to be prepared to lose student athletes because at the end of the day, there's just not unlimited money to go around. I wish there was, but that's just not the way the real world works.
Right.
And as I've learned in college athletics, everybody is replaceable. That's not because we want to. We want to keep a lot of our student athletes. I wish we could keep every single one of them. But at the end of the day, if they choose to move on, you got to find someone to fill their shoes. Yeah, and I hate to say that, but again, it's adapt or die because there's other schools out there that don't care. They'll come in and they'll take your best players for 4 times what you could pay them, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's quite the evolution. I remember with Jason when we first got hired, we were trying to figure out how to fundraise. Like we were trying to figure out how to put it all together and to get contracts in place. And Jason can probably attest to this. What it's evolved to in probably just 2 years is a complete 180.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it really reminds me of the tech space, right? In how fast, when you think of like AI and how fast that is evolving. I mean, NIL has evolved just as rapidly. And to Brennan's point, I mean, yeah, 3 years ago it was yeah, we want to give every kid money, and we got to have a contract and making sure we have that in place. And then, right, it's fundraising. All right, how do we get that? And then it's, okay, now we need to raise more. And it's kind of, I don't want to say snowballed, but I mean, it's snowballed, right? And it's just getting more and more insane. And, I don't know if legislation fixes it or not, I'll be honest, but something has to change. It's going to get to a point where it's just it's going to be unattainable, and right, it's going to cave in on itself.
Right.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. It's not. You can't use that as an excuse, but it's. We got to do better, because at the end of the day, I think I'm all for student athletes making money, but again, there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong what we're doing now as a collective whole in the NCAA. But if we don't figure it out, college sports is going to suffer, and I think you're already seeing that taking place a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us how we get a hold of you guys, right? Pemberton wins the lotto tomorrow. Jason, how should he get a hold?
Play the lotto, which he doesn't do, but yes.
How should he get a hold of you guys, Jason?
Well, Pemberton, he's got my number, so he wins big in the lotto. He can just shoot me a text. But if anybody else out there wins the lotto and feels like they want to support Empower the Nest, right, they can contact me at jason.t.higdon@live.com. Or you can send an email to our Empower the Nest mailbox, which is mail@empowerthenest.com.
And then if I want that tax write-off, so I want to go directly to ISU, Brennan, how do I contact you guys? Can I make a donation directly online, or is there someone to contact?
Yeah, you can contact me. You can look up my information on our staff directory. I won't give out my public number over this. But, you can contact Paul Cabas, who serves as our deputy athletic director. He oversees all external operations. Obviously, myself as the GM, I kind of oversee the day-to-day operations. But if you're more interested in the giving side, I would recommend reaching out to Nathaniel Smith. He's our associate AD for revenue generation, and he's an absolute expert when it comes to fundraising, tax deduction, and that's his wheelhouse. So I'll leave that to him. But yeah, I would just say to I know I said it on our last call, as fans, donors, administration, we got to continue to embrace it. I know it may not always be fun. I know it's very frustrating to keep up with it, but I think we're one of the most fortunate mid-majors there is right now. I truly believe that for what we've been able to do, how we've grown this thing, and I mean, look at the success we had this year. Not just in football or men's and women's basketball. I believe it just got announced we won the All Sports Trophy again. So continue to embrace it, and again, it's just a testament to our fans and our donors. They're the ones that are supporting this machine that continues to grow, and we need everybody to continue to step up.
Yeah, and if folks don't want to dig through the ISU directory to find Brennan, they can just contact me, and I can get a hold of Brennan.
Yeah, or me, right?
Yeah, or you too, John.
Yeah. So, all right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on. This is Bird Fans Forever podcast, episode number 84, with Brennan White and Jason Higdon. So, John, hit it.